If you've ever considered homeschooling your kids, or you're currently homeschooling your kids and you want to homestead, or you just are doing both and you just need some encouragement, this is the episode for you. I have Kody Hanner on the podcast today, and she and I talk about all things homesteading and homeschooling, which for 25 years, that was a big part of my life. So it was really a fun conversation. I hope you enjoy this conversation. And this is part one of a two-part series. So the next part will be episode 64. This is episode 63. Enjoy. Welcome to the Homesteading for Beginners podcast, your go-to resource for starting and maintaining a thriving homestead. I'm Mona Weathers, your homesteading mentor and coach. Together, we'll explore the world of homesteading with the right mindset, ensuring a healthy and fulfilling journey for you, your family, and your community. Join me as I share stories from my own 20-plus year journey. We also have expert guests joining us on the show, bringing their unique insights and experiences to help you on your homesteading path. Let's grow together and create the homestead of your dreams. Today, I have Kody Hanner from the Homestead Education podcast on. And as I always do, I like to tell you where I met people. And I think we just met in that Facebook group, right? It was a Facebook group for homesteading podcasters. So there's just a small group of us in there, but I feel like we're quickly becoming friends because I've been on her podcast and she's now on my podcast. And I'm on episode 55. I looked it up. I'm on episode 55 of the Homestead Education podcast, if you want to listen to that. And we had a great time chatting, and I'm just really excited to continue our conversation today. Welcome, Kody. I am so glad you're here.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Okay, so today we're going to chat about homeschooling kids on the homestead. As my listeners probably have heard, unless you're new to the podcast, I am a homeschool mom of 25 years. This was my last year, my 25th and last year of homeschooling. Did I say homestead? I think I said homestead. I get homesteading and homeschooling. And like when I start talking about both of those, I interchange them. So if that happens, just fix it in your mind.
It's always a mouthful, the homesteading homeschooler.
Yeah, exactly. So I feel like I should have gotten some sort of award for doing 25 years. But my reward is that my kids are, they're well-rounded and they love to learn and they had a great experience on the homestead. So,
I was going to give you a gold star.
Oh, thank you. Actually, my niece did buy me, and she wasn't even homeschooled I didn't have anything to do with her education. And she bought me some flowers for my 25 years. That was sweet.
That is sweet.
Yeah. So for 20 of my homeschooling years, I was a homesteader as well. So that's why this conversation that we're going to start having is going to resonate a lot with me, especially since you have a lot of young ones still. Mm-hmm. So I'm really excited to get started with this conversation. But first, can you please share a little bit about yourself and your homesteading journey and when homeschooling came into the picture as well?
Absolutely. So, I kind of joke that I'm the black sheep of the homesteading world because I started out homesteading, although we didn't call it homesteading. We had a ranch. My dad was a hunting guide. We had cattle and horses, and that was just my life. I majored in agriculture, so I was very much, even though we didn't call it homesteading, always been a part of it. But then I went into commercial agriculture, which is a totally different beast. And I worked there for a lot of years before we started homeschooling and then restarting our homestead journey about 7 or 8 years ago.
Nice. And when did you start homeschooling your kids? First, I guess, tell us about your family. You have 6 kids, right?
We have 6 kids. We're yours, mine, and ours. Mm-hmm. My husband and I met, we were just talking about it last night. We're going up on 9 years now. He was a widower and I was a single mom, and We each had 2 kids, and we, I think, blessed each other because we were both struggling with it. Of course, being a widower for him was really hard. But for me, I was trying to be a single mom of twins while launching my corporate career.
Wow.
And I was exhausted. I mean, I was working 80-hour weeks while trying to deal with 2 small children, one of whom's autistic. And we met, and he is a disabled vet, so he was able to step in and help me in a place that I couldn't be there for my kids. And I was able to step in for his kids and do some laundry.
I imagine a lot of laundry, 6 kids.
A lot of laundry. He was especially being a widower. He's like, I provided them with pizza. That covers my parenting responsibilities for the week. So we decided, we were in California at the time, and we were like, this is not the life for us. I mean, I think you went down that same path. We were in Northern California, still a little bit of a different beast. And we moved to Oregon, and we weren't happy with the schooling there almost right away. The kids had only been in school there for about a year, and we were like, this is not what we wanted as an education for our kids. It was very lenient. I mean, there was just really no expectations of the kids. It felt like I was just sending them to a babysitter all day long. It wasn't an educational program. And then our oldest got in a little trouble at school, nothing major, but we were just like, we're feeling really frustrated. And my husband got a diagnosis of liver disease. It all kind of happened at the same time, where we're like, we need to make some major changes in our life. And our neighbors had just started homeschooling through a charter. And they were like, do you want to try this? We're like, homeschooling? No, no, that's not for us. Like, like, we have 4 kids in school and an infant right now. Like, we are not playing this game. And she was like, well, it's a little different because you do it through a public charter school. They give you money to buy curriculum. They teach you how to homeschool. And I was like, well, maybe let's just try it with him and see how it goes. Like, I think it was January. So we're like, let's bring him home for the rest of the year. Let him just kind of reset. He was going to be starting high school in the fall. And we're like, maybe he just needs a break. And we brought him home, and within 6 weeks, we had all 4 kids home. And we knew that this was right for us. I sat down with the teachers at the charter school, and they explained to me how it worked. I had no clue what homeschooling was. And once I realized that this was something that we wanted to do and that we could do, and that it opened up this whole world of freedom for us, I felt like I was bound to the school all the time. And suddenly it was like, wait, like, my husband's a disabled vet. I'm doing the stay-at-home mom thing for a few years while we have babies, and I can have my kids home. Like, this is the life we want.
Yeah.
I mean, we literally went home that day and said, we're done with school for the day. Let's go to the mountains. And it changed our lives right there.
Yeah, you spoke so much truth in, like, how much it was for me as well. Like the freedom, is amazing. Although I never started my kids out, like, my oldest daughter has been homeschooled since she was 4, so she's 30 now.
Oh, wow.
So, or almost, she's 30 and a half, I guess. But but I've always known the freedom. So it was really hard even for me when I thought about putting them into a traditional school setting or a public school setting. Like, I'm going to lose that freedom. And for a period, one of my sons was in the high school, and it felt like a little bit like the freedom was a little bit gone. But anyway, I just resonate with that a lot. Was the charter school in California?
That was actually in Oregon.
Oh, okay. Because it sounds a lot like charter schools in California, the way you described it, but they're not like that here in Georgia. Or maybe they are, they just weren't free. So in California, they were free.
Yeah. In Oregon, they were free too. They actually, not only were they free, we had $1,600 a year per kid to spend on curriculum.
Yeah, that's the way it was. Yeah.
Yeah, as long as it wasn't Christian curriculum, which we could use Christian curriculum and it would count towards their credits, but they wouldn't pay for that. We had to
Yeah,
pay for that ourselves.
that's exactly the way it was in California. So I was kind of shocked that it was not that way here in Georgia, but we worked it out. Okay, so what do you have on your homestead? Like, what are you doing on your homestead currently?
So our primary source of income is our pigs. We have 9
Mm,
sows. We do about 250 piglets a year. I sell them as 4-H piglets, piglets for people who want to raise feeders. And then I do whole hogs, half hogs, and retail cuts.
mm,
We also have 3 dairy cows. We let them go dry for a year. We needed just a break while we launched our
mhm.
other business. And they are all bred and coming home from the neighbors today, actually. So
Oh,
I'm
nice.
excited this fall we'll be able to start selling raw milk again.
Okay, awesome.
Yeah. And
And
then, of course, we have chickens and a couple of beef cows and,
okay.
all the normals.
All the normals. Well, you're speaking to beginner homesteaders and dreamers, so this
Oh,
may
I guess
not be
that's true.
normal
Yeah.
for them. But it is kind of like you have the picture of a homesteader, like what most people kind of picture when they homestead. Like they have pretty much several
Hmm.
different types of livestock, and you have a garden as well.
Yeah. We have a couple gardens and an orchard,
Okay.
which, we have all this. And I say that I kind of homesteaded my whole life.
Hmm.
But when we started this journey again about, yeah, like I said, it's about 7 years ago, I mean, we had a garden and an extra 4-H pig and 2 chickens.
Hmm.
That was kind of we hunted a lot. Our garden, maybe we were living in the high desert of Oregon where it's like a zone 4 growing. We barely got a tomato, I think, every other year.
Hmm.
But I was convinced I was gonna have a garden.
Hmm.
Um, when we moved up here to Idaho and we bought 40 acres, and I was like, I want a full farm. I want the whole thing.
Hmm.
And I hustled my butt off and had to learn a lot to really switch my mind out of that commercial mindset into being a homesteader.
Hmm. Yeah. What's this is not part of my questions, but like, what do you mean, like switching the commercial? Like, what is the difference between that and, you know?
Well, for one, it's a lot of using chemicals,
Mm,
which I didn't even think about because even in some of the commercial settings I worked in were organic commodity plants.
hmm.
And there were still chemicals we were allowed to use there that were considered organic that I would never use on my farm right now.
Mm,
I mean, just like cleaning things with ammonia,
mm,
I would never do that, like
hmm.
on my own farm. Another one was size. I mean, even growing up on the ranch, my dad had like 300 head of cattle.
Mm,
When we ran them through the chute to worm them and give them their shots and stuff every year, we would buy several $500 containers of wormer that we
mm,
would spray on their backs as they went through.
mm,
Now I have 3 dairy cows. I'm not buying a $500 thing of wormer. If I put this wormer on my dairy cows, can I drink the milk? I mean,
mm,
I had to ask all these questions that I feel blessed that I even knew to ask those questions
mhm.
because of, growing up on the ranch and my ag background and stuff. But, and that's actually, I mean, I might be jumping the gun a little bit, but that's what started my idea to do the homestead education because there's so many
Mhm.
people that aren't blessed with a little bit of an ag or rural background that know to ask these questions and can either end up spending way too much or actually hurting what they're trying to do.
Right. Yeah. That's great. I want people to see, to like you said, some things that some people may not have thought about, like the chemicals used, and all
Mhm.
those little things matter and they add up. And I think that's what the problem with pretty kind of with the commercial part is that every little one thing may not be toxic
Mhm.
in itself in there or whatever. But when you
Mhm.
start adding and building on the toxic materials, and then it is
Mhm.
super toxic to the body. So
And
yeah, that's
it's about making choices. I mean,
mhm,
like our 9 sows that live here on the farm, I
mhm,
do not commercially worm them. They
mhm,
don't need it. I'm able to keep them healthy through preventative practices.
mhm.
natural preventative practices.
Mhm.
Every piglet that goes off of my farm gets a commercial wormer because as soon as they get in that horse trailer and or the back of somebody's truck and drive across the state,
Mhm.
their immune system drops to nothing. And
Mhm.
all livestock have a worm load. It's whether or not you can keep it under control. And as soon as their immune system drops, that goes through the roof.
Right.
So it's
Yeah.
just about making those educated choices.
Yeah. Yeah, we will talk about your education material because that is really important. Um, so do you feel like you have a strong homeschooling community, like homesteading like we'll talk about homeschooling first.
Mhm.
Like, do you feel like you have a strong homeschooling community and how is that making it, benefiting you if you do?
Well, we're really lucky. We live in a community that last I heard 40% of our county homeschooled.
Mm.
And that doesn't include the Mennonite families that have their own school through the church that only go a few days a week.
Mhm.
So I pretty much feel like our whole county is one big homeschool co-op.
Mhm. That's
We
awesome.
all we all do 4-H together. We had
Mhm.
homeschool prom last week. There's for the little kids, there's weekly meetups at the park that,
Mhm.
isn't just a handful of moms. It's probably 100 kids there.
Okay.
And so the kids really have that good community and they feel like they're part of a group and everybody's really supportive. And they're really supportive of like all different styles of homeschooling.
Mhm.
We kind of like our freedom up here in North Idaho.
Yeah.
On the flip side, though, our family doesn't agree with what we do.
Mm.
So we've really struggled with not having that support from our parents and extended
Mhm.
family on homeschooling.
Yeah, that is really tough. I started so long ago that it's not like we were trailblazers by any means. It was like the generation before that were kind of the trailblazers. And I had my pastor and his wife were homeschooling their kids, and I looked up to them so much because no one around me had that. None of my family. But I do have fond memories of the times, because we traveled a lot as a kid, of the times my parents had to teach me.
Hmm.
And it wasn't like, well, I moved to Germany when I was a kid, and there was a transition time where I couldn't go to school, and my dad had made curriculum for me. And I just remember just loving that. And that actually brought me to a reason I decided to homeschool, is because I remember that being a fond memory for me. And it's not like it was very long. It was probably a very short period of time, but it just brought that, like, oh, my dad is helping me learn. And I really love that. So, but yes, community is so important. We talk about that in the homesteading space as well. Do you
Hmm.
feel like your homesteading community is as strong, or?
Yeah, I really do. We have a pretty good group up here. I mean, it kind of falls into that same category of how many of us homeschool. We're all very connected.
Mhm.
So, I mean, we get phone calls random times of the day. Hey, do you have a single shot of penicillin that you can bring over to my animal?
Mm.
Versus, the neighbor cans a bunch of applesauce and brings us all the peels to feed our pigs. I mean,
Mm.
it's kind of all of us working together and sharing what we have.
Right. The term for that is agrarian, isn't it? Is it like an agrarian community?
Yeah, I
Yeah.
was like, so I was actually just talking last night about following the agrarian calendar. So,
Okay. I just recently was introduced to that term, and I'm like, that's what that means, like that we're all helping each other. I mean,
mhm,
if I'm wrong, so you can correct me. But that's what I love about the homesteading community, is that that's the part that we don't have to, like, you don't have to have everything. Your
mm-mm,
community can fill parts of the things that you want. So, like, if
yeah.
I wanted pigs, but I'm like, I don't really want to do a really big pig setup, I could ask you, can I buy, the pigs? Like, you're doing pretty much the thing that I want to do, but I don't really want to do it. So
Mhm,
I want the meat, but I don't really want to raise the pigs, or something like that. So I can
mhm,
get what I want from you by in supporting you.
mhm.
If we were closer, I would do that.
We live a 40-minute drive to the closest grocery store.
Okay.
So I love that sometimes, on a weekend morning, we'll have a neighbor show up that just wants to buy a couple packs of sausage
Mhm.
and a dozen eggs.
Mhm.
And we get to sit and have our coffee on the porch with the neighbors just because they wanted to be able to make breakfast and not drive to town.
Mhm. That's awesome. I love that. I love that. Okay. What are the best moments you have as a homesteader and homeschool mom? Like, describe a perfect day for us, like for you, like what that would mean if you had like a perfect homeschooling day. What would that look like for you?
Well, we aim for it a lot of days, and I'm not gonna say that it happens every day because on a homestead, nothing ever happens the same.
Mhm.
But, we get up in the mornings, the kids go feed while my husband and I kinda get the morning going, starting coffee, breakfast for the babies.
Mhm.
When the older kids get back, they sit down and do their school, and I do school with the littles. And then, if they need me, when the littles only take a few minutes, so
Mhm.
then I'll switch to, teaching algebra or something.
Mhm.
And then, we're usually done about lunchtime. We have lunch, we put the babies down for a nap, and we go out and start working.
Mhm. And
Usually at the end of the day, we do dinner, watch, something on TV or read out loud or something.
mhm. Yeah, and a homeschool day doesn't take as long as a school day in a public school. A lot of
Mm-mm.
people think that, you have to go from 9 to 3 or whatever, but you don't. You can get so much done in a short period of time. A lot of times that would happen with my kids because they were distracted or something. So if
Well,
I
yeah.
had certain things for them to
There has been
do,
days where they sit at the table for 12 hours and I'm like, "Congratulations, I hope you're enjoying your day."
yeah, yeah. But a perfect day, like that's I love the part where you go back, you go outside and you do the chores, and there's just there's just so much value in the homesteading life,
Mhm.
and how it can shape kids. My youngest is the one that grew up on the homestead, like we born and raised on a homestead. And
Nice.
so yeah, she is like she's probably the most well-rounded, I feel like. But she just understood life sooner. She understood death
Mhm.
sooner. She helped me when the goats were being born, during kidding season. She was one time I was babysitting some my friend's kids, and one of my goats went into labor, and she was taking care of it all. And I don't know if you're familiar with the app Voxer. It's a walkie-talkie app
Oh,
on a
yes.
phone. So she
Mhm.
had her I no, I think it was an iPod. She didn't have a phone then. So she had her iPod and she was talking to me through that. So I'd know what was going on, and I was
Oh,
able to come
that's
out at
great.
the right time. Yeah. So just those experiences you can't duplicate anywhere else,
Oh, I
really, like
agree.
on a farm.
This was the first year that our 2 littles, they're 3 and 5,
Mhm.
that they were able to help us with the farming, where they have done every step from the time we got our, Cornish cross chicks all the way to their first butcher.
Mm. Yeah.
And that was really cool to have the 3 and 5-year-old be a part of that. Like, they were in
Mhm.
charge of feeding. Even once they moved outside, they're in charge of feeding. And then my husband took them out to butcher and clean the birds, and they helped with all of that.
Mhm.
We let the birds sit for a day in the fridge. The next day, he had the boys he'd cut it up, and they'd drop it in the bags, and
Mm.
he's talking to them like, "These were the birds that we were butchering 2 days ago. These are the chicks we got, 2 months
Mhm.
ago," and was having those conversations with them, and it was really interesting to see their wheels turning and learning as
Mhm.
they went.
Yeah, that's great. And my my youngest she was the one that was around when we were butchering too. I don't know how old she was when we first started, but she became so comfortable with it. I don't know. I don't know if did I share this story with you?
I
She
don't
would
remember.
she would take the feet of the chickens, because you have to process the chickens and their feet. So she would take the feet and walk around, and there's a certain tendon that you can pull and it'll close up the foot. So
Uh-huh.
she would walk around and pick up things with it. Like, these are the stories that your kids will have,
No,
especially.
I remember. So, my dad was a hunting guide, and sometimes we also had contracts to do depredation hunting on vineyards for wild pigs.
Mm-hmm.
which depredation is, going and killing the pigs to get them off because they can take out a whole vineyard in a night.
Oh, wow.
It's bad. And so we lived near the big um, wineries like Gallo and Parducci and Fetzer and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And so we'd have to go in and, I mean, pigs are an invasive species in California.
Mm-hmm.
So we'd get sometimes 20 in a night. And I remember being like really little, and we'd take them all home and we were cleaning them, and I'd pop all the eyeballs out. And
How old were you?
I like probably 4 or 5.
Oh, wow.
And my dad had this big like clamshell by the pool that was always full of water during hunting season because it was winter, like spring and fall was when we would do this a lot. And I remember dropping them all in this big shell, and it was like eyeball
Wow.
soup. I don't know.
Oh,
So I mean,
gosh.
like kids that grow up in those ways, they're a different breed.
Right. That's so true. And my daughter would be the one, if it was a new family, not familiar with the process of, processing meat birds, she would be the one that would make them more comfortable. She would be the one that would say, "Oh, look what you can do." And then all of a sudden, all the kids are running around. At first, they're
Oh,
timid
yeah, my
about it,
kids would be the first to make it weird, so.
Yeah. But that's great. Okay, so let's move on to your homeschool curriculum.
Mhm.
I would love to hear about it. What made you decide to start writing? You sort of touched on that, but what made you decide to start writing it? And just tell us a little bit about your curriculum.
It mainly started because we were new homeschool parents and thought we had to teach the kids all the things all the time.
Mhm.
And when my husband, like I had said, got diagnosed with liver disease, we had to go all natural. And I was, of course, a newlywed, where thinking my husband, we had no clue how long he had. And so I just threw myself into this where I was, practically obsessed into how we could grow and source all of our own food to make him like the healthiest as possible. But I was spending so much time doing that, I felt like I was neglecting the kids' studies.
Mhm.
So I started creating lessons. So whatever I studied, I would create a lesson out of it. That would be their science lesson for the next day. And then I could spend the day researching the next thing.
Mm.
And then as we, trying to learn how to make broth or we were pasteurizing our milk at first because with his liver disease, we have to be really careful about pathogens and that type of thing.
Mm.
We don't pasteurize anymore. But so we were keeping records and we were trying to learn how to make cheese and keeping records of that. And the kids were just part of all of it. And so I was putting together journals for them as they learned everything and researched everything. And then that's when I kind of started having that conversation with myself of the reason I'm able to do this for them is I know what questions to ask. So I know how to find those answers. And was such a wave of homesteading, 3 years ago with the pandemic, that, I mean, it was awesome. I was applauding it. But there was for lack of better word, blissful ignorance in people that were beginning to homestead for the first time.
Mhm.
And like I said, I'm not trying to say that as an insult because I am traveling for the business now and had to call an Uber for the first time and had no clue how to do it because that is just not my life. I was ignorant to it.
Mhm.
And I realized that this was something that I could provide people, less so the how-to that a lot of homestead educators. I mean, I definitely teach the how-to, but what I realized I could do is I could teach the how-to with the science behind it so that kids and aspiring homesteaders could learn what questions they needed to ask to know what other homestead educators and what other science information and agriculture information and all this like plethora of information is out there, with what to ask, who to go to, what climate, what breed, just things that I remember even reading something that Joel Salatin was doing one time, and I was so excited to try it, and I realized I don't think that'll work in my climate. And that's when it like really, really clicked for me. There is amazing educators out there, but you need to make sure that you are learning from the ones that pertain to your choices, your climate, your breeds, whether or
Mhm.
not you want to follow organic permaculture, or if you're still comfortable with following commercial practices, which, like I said, we kind of do a hybrid of the three.
Mhm.
And it's, if you don't know to ask that question, you could end up, like I said, wasting a lot of money, possibly hurting the animals that you're trying to raise, possibly, destroying your soil or,
Mhm.
and I would just love to be able to save people that time and money, um, by, like I said, teaching the questions that they need to ask.
Mhm. I absolutely love that, and I would have 100% bought your your curriculum when my daughter was young. Like, I actually toyed with the idea of certain things when as I was learning, and
Mhm.
one of the things I toyed with was doing a heritage breed, like a book of some sort, to introduce families like that were coming through the homesteading space. Like, there's other
Mhm.
breeds out there besides all the ones that the three that you see, But
Right?
now everyone is so. I mean, there's so many different breeds out there now, and people are becoming more and more familiar. But
Wonderful.
I love the idea that you took and you ran with it because you saw a need, for one, and
Mhm.
because of your experience you understood what the real need was, you know and
Yeah.
that's something that experience can only really teach. And that's why, I always say, like, get coaching or mentorship from somebody. That's what's missing,
Yeah.
really. I think that's what's missing in the homesteading space, is that newbies are learning from newbies.
Well, and a lot of us are newbies because there's like
Mhm.
2 generations
Yeah.
that skipped these traditional skills.
Mhm.
And that's actually a lot of people ask when they ask about my curriculum, I really talk about the values that I teach in it
Mhm.
because our kids' generation are the furthest removed from the family farm, like
Mhm.
sociologically.
Right.
They weren't raised in a multi-generational farm. They weren't raised working alongside their parents. And there's just a lot of those values that are just gone
Mhm.
that us as, first generation homesteaders are trying to instill back in our kids because that's what our grandparents had. But
Mhm.
we even missed that window.
Mhm. Yep. Yeah, definitely. I don't know where I was talking about this recently. Maybe it was your podcast. I don't know. But recently I was talking about um, how my grandfather, my grandparents all had some sort of garden, and
Mhm.
then it was severed with
Right?
my parents. And that, they didn't learn anything, as far as I know. They haven't shared that with me, but they didn't learn much about gardening and that sort of thing. And now we're trying to get that back as this generation, these generations, and we're trying to now teach our kids to get
Mhm.
that back. And I really love watching this unfold. I hope you enjoyed part 1 of the interview. Just check out episode 64 for the next part. I also wanted to remind you to check the show notes for links to Kody's curriculum. They are in the show notes, as well as her Instagram and YouTube channel. So just check those out. And a reminder again, don't forget to join the free Homestead Income Plan Facebook group. It is doing well, and we had our first 2 trainings. So there are replays for them. So don't worry if you missed the live streams. There are replays. We had Jessica White on talking about flower farming. So it was a really, really good conversation. You do not want to miss it. Okay, have a wonderful rest of your day or evening or wherever you are right now.